Now that I've covered every single exotic class item combo for Hunters, Warlocks, and now Titans, it's time to start diving into some of my favorite prismatic builds that I've been experimenting with since the final shape dropped. And lucky for you guys, today we're going to be covering a Titan build centered around insane levels of ad clear, ability regen, damage resist, and a kit that gives you every single type of champion stun all in one kit. And the best part is that this doesn't rely on an exotic class item at all. But most importantly, this build is overall fun to use, and watching enemies get decimated in Grandmaster Nightfalls gives you all of the Titan serotonin you'll ever need. I'm Above, and if you enjoyed today's video, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into it. The entire goal of this build is to cycle our high damage Consecration slams as often as possible, and in this video, we essentially showcase an infinite charged melee loop that all comes from our choice of super and charged melee ability, with aspects and fragments that take it to the next level. Though Twilight Arsenal is the new hotness for Titan, we're actually going to go with Blade Fury for insane levels of damage resist when in our super, the ability to gain Woven Mail when picking up Orbs of Power for 45% damage resist, and the melee ability refills that it provides on cast. For our class ability, I went with Thruster as it has the shortest cooldown of the three, which makes it the most optimal choice when pairing this subclass with something like Heart of Inmost Light, or armor mods like Outreach that allow us to refund our melee charges as quickly as possible. Frenzied Blade is easily the best choice for Consecration-focused builds, as this provides 3 charged melee abilities that help feed the infinite cycle that we're going for. The grenade slot is flexible depending on your needs, with both the Pulse and Shackle Grenade being S-tier options for anti-champion utility. I personally went with Pulse Grenades for intrinsic overload stuns when paired with Facet of Dominance, which I'll be covering more in depth later in the video. Since we're going for the classic aggressive in-your-face Titan playstyle, our aspects are going to focus on not only damage, but helping us survive when diving into crowds of enemies in underleveled content. First up, we have the obvious pick in Consecration, which turns your charged melee into a tactical nuke by sliding and then activating your charged melee ability. This sends 3 solar waves along the ground that ignite targets on impact for massive AoE damage that also intrinsically stun unstoppable champions. And if that wasn't enough, you also get a free 25% damage resist while in the slam animation, and it's just the start of the damage resist stacking that we've cooked up for you guys with this build. And since we're using Frenzied Blade, as I mentioned earlier, we can spam Consecration 3 times back to back to back. And if you ever run out of charges, we can instantly refill our melee abilities by activating either our super or an even more frequent ability in Transcendence, both of which will instantly refill all 3 melee charges. And when used correctly, these abilities can maintain near infinite Consecration uptime, which turns you into an ad clear machine. All of the footage you're seeing in the background is at a minimum -20 power delta, which just goes to show how powerful this Titan build can actually be in endgame activities. For our second aspect, we went with Knockout, which is the perfect complement to Consecration, as it grants a 50% charged melee damage increase, increased melee lunge distance, healing, and amplified all in one. So at this point in the build, with just our abilities and aspects selected, we already have the ability to spam Consecration, increase our melee damage, gain some damage resist, and heal ourselves up in the process. And the crazy part is that we still haven't even covered Fragments, armor mods, or artifact synergy just yet. As I alluded to earlier, our first fragment is going to be Facet of Dominance, which grants our Arc Grenade's Jolt an intrinsic form of overload stun. Facet of Protection grants us an additional 15% damage resist when surrounded by 3 or more enemy combatants, and actually scales all the way up to 32% damage resist while Transcendent. Facet of Blessing grants health regen on any melee kill, and when combined with the instant health bump that Knockout provides, slaying out with Consecration will restore you to near max health almost instantly. Facet of Dawn grants you Radiant on powered melee hits, which gives us a free 25 25% damage buff and anti-barrier capabilities for spamming our melees. This may seem a bit redundant with Radiant Orbs from the artifact this season, but trust me, it's nice to not always have to rely on orbs for anti-barrier in Grandmasters. And last but definitely not least, we have the fragment that really brings this build together in Facet of Purpose, which grants us Woven Mail every time we pick up an Orb of Power thanks to our Strand Super. This is a free 45% damage resist that stacks with every other source of DR we've mentioned so far, which means you'll have 30% DR from 100 Resilience, 45% from Woven Mail, 32% while Transcendent and surrounded by enemy targets, 25% while in your melee animation, and once we throw in artifact mods like Galvanic Armor that grant an additional 30% DR while amplified, you gain a staggering 86% total damage resist to any source of incoming damage every time we secure a melee kill, which essentially makes us invincible. If you've ever wanted your Titan to be a frontline tank, this build is absolutely for you. Diving into our artifact mods, first up we have Counter Energy, which refunds 25% of your least charged ability when stunning champions, which is happening constantly in endgame content with this build. Next up we have Radiant Orbs, which provides an additional source of anti-barrier and damage bonuses each time we pick up an Orb of Power, and pairs nicely with Galvanic Armor, which grants 30% DR when amplified, both of which occur every time you secure a charged melee kill once our build is finalized. In column 5, we have Shield Crush, which buffs our melee and grenade ability and recharge rate by 25% whenever we have Woven Mail, Amplified, and Radiant active, which is basically all the time. And last but not least, we have Transference, which grants an additional 10% buff to our melee and grenade damage while Transcendent, because who doesn't need more damage? Plus, if you slay out with your weapons during this Transcendent period, you can earn up to 50% on your next Transcendent bar while in your current Transcendence, fueling the cycle of destruction even faster. With that said, you'll definitely be swapping one of these choices to Solar Fulmination when Act 2 drops next Tuesday, as this perk will significantly increase the damage and explosion radius of our Consecration ignitions, which is gonna take this build to a whole new level. Now, to polish off the build with our armor mods, on the helmet, make sure to use hands-on for crazy super gains on melee final blows, along with a siphon mod that matches your go-to add clear weapon for additional orbs of power and sources of woven mail. On the gauntlets, I went with heavy-handed to spawn orbs of power on melee final blows. Since those orbs are what give us all the crazy buffs we've covered today, this mod is absolutely essential to this build. On the chest piece, you'll want to throw on resist mods that match the incoming activity threat for even more DR, and on the boots, you'll want to go with Invigoration, Recuperation, and Absolution to reduce your melee ability cooldowns, gain health regen, and also gain universal ability cooldowns on all orb pickups. Lastly, on our class item, Powerful Attraction will let us pick up all these orbs every time we use Thruster, and we'll pair this with 2 stacks of Outreach to give us increased melee regen whenever we use our class ability. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this can all be done without an exotic class item, and the nice part is that there's tons of flexibility with the exotic slot here. If you want more ability cooldowns, you can go with Heart of Inmost Light, and if you want more damage, you can go with Syntheseps. And if you're lucky enough to have the class item that contains both, you can absolutely take this build to the next level. My favorite exotic class item combos are Spirit of Inmost and Synthos, and my sleeper pick is Spirit of Inmost with Contact for additional sources of jolt whenever we use Consecration. Now, you guys know that I don't usually play much Titan, but this build is so much fun that I've actually been farming GMs pretty much exclusively on my Titan all season so far, and I hope that you guys enjoy this build as much as I do. If you guys ever need homies to run GMs or dual Destiny with, I stream Destiny most days over at twitch.tv/above, so feel free to swing on by the stream and farm some schloot. Anyways, guys, that's it from me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace!